Karen gave hunters access to my ranch. They shot my son's mini horse. Now she's facing charges. The sun hung low over the Montana horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, as if it were trying to apologize for the day's coming tragedy. My ranch, a sprawling 200 acres of rolling hills and whispering pines, had always been my sanctuary. It was where I raised my son, Caleb, and where we'd built a life after his mother passed. The land was more than dirt and grass. It was our story, etched in every fence post and hoofprint. But that story took a dark turn the day Karen moved in next door. Karen was a whirlwind of self-righteousness wrapped in a pastel cardigan. She arrived in our quiet valley with her Prius, her organic kale smoothies, and a superiority complex that could choke a horse. She'd bought the old Miller place, a modest plot abutting my ranch, and within days, she was knocking on my door, clipboard in hand, lecturing me about sustainable land use. I'm a rancher, born and bred. Me family's been working this land for 3 generations. I know sustainable. But Karen? She thought she knew better. Mr. Dawson, she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension, your cattle are a blight on the ecosystem. Have you considered rewilding? Letting nature take its course? I nodded politely, biting back a retort about how her manicured lawn wasn't exactly nature's course. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to raise my son, tend my herd, and keep my little corner of the world intact. Caleb, my 10-year-old, was the heart of that world. He was a quiet kid, all freckles and dreams, with a smile that could melt the coldest winter. After his mother died, he'd found solace in animals, especially Tinker, his miniature horse. Tinker was a pint-sized bundle of mischief, no taller than a Great Dane, with a chestnut coat and a knack for stealing carrots from Caleb's pocket. The two were inseparable. Caleb would spend hours brushing Tinker's mane, whispering secrets to him under the big oak by the creek. That horse was his best friend, his confidant, his anchor in a world that had already taken too much from him. But Karen didn't see that. To her, Tinker was just another unsustainable part of my ranch. She'd wrinkle her nose whenever she saw Caleb leading him across the field, muttering about overgrazing or animal welfare. I ignored her. I figured she'd tire herself out eventually, like a yappy dog chasing its tail. I was wrong. It started with the hunters. Hunting season in Montana is sacred. Folks come from all over to track deer or elk on public land. My ranch, though, was private, and I'd always been clear, no hunters allowed. The signs were posted every 100 yards along my fence line, clear as day. But Karen, in her infinite wisdom, decided my rules didn't apply. One crisp October morning, I woke to the sound of gunshots. Not distant pops from the national forest, but sharp, close cracks that echoed across my fields. My stomach dropped. Caleb was already up, out by the creek with Tinker, like he was every morning. I grabbed my rifle not to shoot, but to scare off whatever fool was trespassing, and sprinted toward the sound. Caleb, I shouted, my voice hoarse with panic. The shots were coming from the north pasture, near the boundary with Karen's property. I found Caleb there, crouched behind a boulder, his face pale and streaked with tears. Tinker lay a few yards away, motionless, a dark stain spreading across his chestnut flank. My heart stopped. The world tilted. Daddy, Caleb sobbed, his voice barely a whisper. They shot him. They shot Tinker. I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands shaking as I checked Tinker's body. The bullet had gone clean through his chest. He was gone. My boy's best friend, his little piece of joy, was gone. Rage and grief clawed at my chest, but I held Caleb tight, shielding him from the sight. That's when I saw them 3 men in blaze-orange vests, rifles slung over their shoulders, trudging through the field toward Karen's property. They didn't even glance back. Stay here, I told Caleb, my voice low and dangerous. I stormed after them, my rifle still in hand. They were halfway across Karen's land when I caught up, shouting, "Who the hell are you? And why are you on my ranch?" The leader, a burly guy with a beard like a briar patch, turned and raised his hands. "Whoa, easy, pal. We had permission." "Permission?" I spat. "This is my land. I don't give permission." He frowned, confused. Lady next door said it was fine. Said she owned the access rights or something. We paid her for a guide. My blood ran cold. Karen. Of course it was Karen. I didn't wait for more explanations. I marched straight to her house, pounding on her door until she opened it, her face a mask of fake surprise. "Mr. Dawson, what's the matter?" she asked, clutching her cardigan like a shield. "You let hunters onto my land," I growled. "They shot my son's horse. His pet. What the hell were you thinking?" Her eyes widened, but only for a moment before that smug look returned. "I was trying to help the community. Hunters bring revenue, and your land is practically a wildlife corridor. I checked the property records. There's an easement. I have every right to grant access." "An easement?" I was shaking now, barely holding it together. "You think some old survey gives you the right to let strangers with guns traipse through my home? You got a 10-year-old boy's horse killed, Karen." She flinched at that, but her jaw tightened. "I didn't know they'd shoot a horse. They were after deer. Maybe if you didn't let that animal roam so freely." "Don't you dare." I cut her off. "Don't you dare blame me for this." I called the sheriff right then and there. By noon, the hunters were in custody, and Karen was facing questions. Turns out, her easement was a half-baked interpretation of a decades-old grazing agreement, not a hunting permit. The hunters admitted they'd paid her $500 each for exclusive access to my land, which she'd advertised online as a private hunting experience. The sheriff was livid, and so was I. But no amount of justice could bring Tinker back. That night, Caleb wouldn't eat. He sat on the porch, staring at the empty paddock where Tinker used to graze. I tried to talk to him, but he just shook his head, his small hands clenched into fists. "Why'd she do it, Dad?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why'd she let them in?" I didn't have an answer. Not a good one, anyway. I could have said it was greed, or arrogance, or just plain stupidity, but none of it would have made sense to a kid who'd just lost his best friend. So I just held him, letting him cry into my chest until he fell asleep. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was from Karen, written in her neat, looping handwriting. "I'm sorry about the misunderstanding," it read. "I never meant for this to happen. Let's talk and find a solution." A solution? As if words could stitch up the hole in my son's heart. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. But the story didn't end there. A week later, as I was fixing a fence post near the creek, a woman I'd never seen before approached me. She was older, maybe 60, with weathered hands and a no-nonsense air. She introduced herself as Martha, Karen's aunt, who'd been living in a small cabin on the far end of Karen's property. I hadn't even known she was there. Karen never mentioned her. "I heard what happened," Martha said, her voice soft but steady. "I'm sorry about your boy's horse. Karen, she's not a bad person, but she's got a blind spot a mile wide. Always has." I grunted, not in the mood for excuses. But Martha kept talking, and what she said next stopped me cold. "She didn't tell you about the money, did she?" "Not all of it." "What money?" I asked, my gut twisting. Martha sighed, glancing toward Karen's house. "She's in debt. Bad debt. Medical bills from her husband's cancer treatment before he passed. She's been selling off bits of her land, taking odd jobs, anything to keep afloat. Those hunters? She didn't just let them in for kicks. She needed the cash. Desperately." I stared at her, the anger in my chest warring with something else, something I didn't want to name. "That doesn't justify what she did," I said finally. "She lied. She put my son in danger." "I know," Martha said. "I'm not defending her. I'm just trying to explain. She's not evil, Mr. Dawson. She's broken, and she's too proud to admit it." That was the twist I didn't see coming. Karen, the insufferable know-it-all, wasn't just meddling for the sake of it. She was drowning, and in her desperation, she dragged us all under with her. It didn't make me hate her less, but it made me see her differently. She wasn't a villain, just a woman who'd made a terrible mistake, thinking she could control the chaos she'd unleashed. The sheriff's investigation dug deeper. Karen was charged with trespassing, fraud, and reckless endangerment. The hunters faced charges for illegal hunting and animal cruelty. The courtroom was a circus. Karen's lawyer argued she was a victim of circumstance, while the prosecutor painted her as a reckless opportunist. I didn't care about the legal details. I just wanted her to face the consequences of what she'd done. But the real consequence wasn't in the courtroom. It was in Caleb's eyes, the way they'd lost their spark. He stopped going to the creek. He stopped talking about Tinker. And every time I saw Karen's Prius in her driveway, I felt a fresh wave of rage. I wanted her gone, not just from the courtroom, but from our lives. The weeks following Tinker's death were a blur of grief and fury. My ranch, once a place of peace, felt like a battlefield. Every creak of the fence or rustle in the grass sent my heart racing, half expecting another trespasser with a rifle. Caleb withdrew further, spending hours in his room, sketching pictures of Tinker that he'd hide under his pillow. I tried to reach him, but my words felt hollow. How do you comfort a child when you're barely holding yourself together? Karen's trial loomed like a storm cloud. The valley buzzed with gossip. Some folks pitted her, others called her a menace. I stayed out of it. My focus was Caleb and keeping the ranch afloat. But Martha, Karen's aunt, kept showing up like a ghost I couldn't shake. She'd bring casseroles or offer to fix a loose board on the barn, always with that quiet, knowing look. I didn't want her kindness. It felt like a betrayal of Tinker, of Caleb. But she was persistent, and one evening, as the sun dipped below the pines, she caught me off guard. "Mr. Dawson," she said, leaning against the porch rail, "you ever think about forgiveness?" I snorted, setting down the hammer I'd been using to mend a chair. "Forgiveness? For what she did? You're joking." Martha didn't flinch. "Not saying it's easy. Not saying she deserves it. But holding on to that Haiti—it's like drinking poison and expecting her to keel over. It's eating you up, and your boy sees it." Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I saw it in Caleb's eyes, the way he watched me when I cursed Karen's name or slammed a door after a call from the sheriff. He was losing more than Tinker. He was losing the father who used to laugh with him, who'd carry him on his shoulders to check the herd. But forgiveness? That was a bridge too far. The trial began in November, a gray, bitter day that matched my mood. The courtroom was packed. Ranchers, townsfolk, even a few reporters sniffing out a juicy story. Karen sat at the defense table, her cardigan replaced by a stiff blazer, her face pale but defiant. The hunters, who'd cut a deal to testify against her, slouched in their seats, avoiding my glare. I sat with Caleb, his small hand gripping mine, as the prosecutor laid out the case. Karen had advertised exclusive hunting access on a shady online forum, claiming she had legal rights to my land. She'd pocketed $1,500 from the hunters, never once checking their credentials or warning them about the no-hunting signs. The easement she'd cited was a 1950s grazing agreement, long expired, and even then, it didn't cover hunting. Her defense was flimsy. She claimed she'd acted in good faith, believing she was helping the community and easing her financial burdens. The prosecutor tore it apart, calling her actions reckless and predatory. When the hunters took the stand, they painted Karen as a smooth-talking opportunist who'd assured them the land was open. She said the owner was out of town. The bearded leader muttered, glancing at me, said it was all cleared. I wanted to lunge across the room, but Caleb's hand in mine kept me grounded. Then came the twist no one expected, not even me. Martha took the stand as a character witness for Karen. I'd assumed she'd spin some sob story about Karen's debt, but what she said was stranger, darker. She told the court about Karen's husband, Tom, who died of cancer 2 years ago. Tom had been a hunter, a proud one, and Karen had hated it. She'd begged him to stop, called it cruel, but he'd laughed it off. After his death, Karen spiraled grief, debt, and a festering resentment toward the life Tom had loved. Letting hunters onto my land, Martha said, wasn't just about money. It was Karen's warped way of reclaiming control, of spitting on Tom's memory by turning his passion into her profit. The courtroom went silent. Karen's face crumpled, her hands shaking as she wiped her eyes. For the first time, I saw her not as a villain, but as a woman unmoored, lashing out at a world that had broken her. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it cracked the armor of my rage, letting in a sliver of pity. Caleb's testimony was the hardest part. He was so small in that witness box, his voice trembling as he described finding Tinker, the blood, the gunshots. The jury's eyes glistened, and even the judge looked shaken. When the defense asked if he'd ever seen Karen be unkind to Tinker, Caleb paused, then said, "She didn't like him. She said he was bad for the land. But I didn't think she'd let someone hurt him." His words hung in the air, heavy as lead. The verdict came quickly. Karen was found guilty of trespassing, fraud, and reckless endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 2 years probation, a $10,000 fine, and 500 hours of community service. The hunters got off lighter fines and suspended hunting licenses. As Karen was let out, she turned to me, her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. I looked away. I thought the trial's end would bring closure, but it didn't. Caleb was still haunted, and I was still angry not just at Karen, but at myself. I'd failed to protect Tinker, to keep my son's world safe. The ranch felt tainted, its beauty marred by that dark stain in the north pasture. I considered selling it, starting over somewhere new, but the thought of leaving our home, our history, was unbearable. Then came the second twist, the one that broke me open. One snowy December morning, I found a package on the porch. No note, no return address. Inside was a small wooden carving of a miniature horse, its chestnut coat painted with care, its eyes bright and mischievous. It was Tinker, captured perfectly. Caleb gasped when he saw it, clutching it to his chest like a lifeline. For the first time in months, he smiled. I knew who'd left it. Martha confirmed it later, saying she'd whittled it herself, hoping it might ease Caleb's pain. He's a good boy, she said. He deserves something to hold on to. I didn't know how to thank her, so I just nodded, my throat tight. That carving became Caleb's talisman, a reminder that even in loss, there was love. But the story's end wasn't tidy. Karen's probation meant she stayed in the valley, her Prius still parked in her driveway. Some days, I'd see her at the gas station or the feed store, her head down, her confidence gone. Part of me wanted to confront her, to scream about the pain she'd caused. Another part, the part Martha had reached, wondered if she was punishing herself enough. Caleb started healing, slowly. The carving helped, and so did a new addition to the ranch, a rescue pony named Scout, who followed Caleb like a shadow. He wasn't Tinker, but he brought a spark back to my boy's eyes. We'd sit by the creek sometimes, Scout grazing nearby, and Caleb would talk about Tinker, about the good memories. I listened, letting his words mend us both. The final blow came in spring, when I learned Karen was selling her land. She couldn't afford the fine or the taxes, and the valley's judgment had worn her down. Martha told me Karen was moving to Boise to live with a cousin. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt a strange, bitter ache. Karen wasn't a monster, just a woman who'd made a terrible choice, and now she was losing everything. I wondered if she'd ever find peace, or if Tinker's death would haunt her like it haunted us. The day she left, I saw her loading boxes into her Prius. She glanced at my ranch, her eyes lingering on the paddock where Scout grazed. For a moment, I thought she might come over, try to apologize again. But she just got in her car and drove away, her taillights fading into the dust. I stood there, watching, feeling the weight of it all: grief, anger, pity, and something like forgiveness, fragile and untested. The ranch is quieter now. Caleb's laughter is returning, and Scout's hoofbeats fill the silence Tinker left behind. But the scars remain, etched into our land, our hearts. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive Karen, or if I should. What I do know is that hate is heavy, and I'm tired of carrying it. For Caleb's sake, for my own, I'm trying to let it go, one day at a time. What do you think? Was Karen a villain who deserved her punishment, or a broken woman caught in her own desperation? Should I forgive her, or hold on to my anger for what she took from us? Share your thoughts. I'd like to hear where you stand on right and wrong in this messy, human story.